All right, our session today is titled Be Proactive, Help Your Stakeholders Get on Board with MyStar Now. So thank you again for being here, and we'll dig right in. Today we're going to hear from two presenters. First, we'll hear from Chris Gear, who is our MyStar Professional Learning Coordinator. And she is a recently retired MyStar teacher as well. So she's got lots of great tips and tricks for us to get your stakeholders on board. And then we'll hear from Barb McIntyre, who is a MyStar Assessment Associate. And she is also a retired MyStar teacher. So she's got a lot of great information to help your stakeholders better understand NGSS-aligned assessments, and has some good resources to share with you today. My name is Lindsay Watch, and I will be the session facilitator today. I work for MyStar with the curriculum development and professional learning teams. So thank you again for being here today. Chris has put the link to the slides in the agenda in the chat, and then we will also I'll throw the agenda in there as well. So go ahead and hop in there. We will be doing a bit of interactiveness with the slides, so make sure you can get in there and you've got edit access and you can follow along with us. And so without further ado, we will start with our first interactive activity. So as you're getting into those slides, we'd like to get your mind gears rolling and thinking about what kinds of questions do you often hear, about your science class from parents and caregivers and other stakeholders, your administrators and others that you work with, through email, through conferences, IEPs, phone calls. What types of questions do you hear about science, about MyStar? So go ahead and grab one of the yellow sticky notes that are on the slide. And I'll actually, so you should be able to live edit those. It looks like some people are in there. So there's multiple slides that you can go to fill in an answer. And we'll just take a moment to get some questions out there. Well, great. Thanks so much for adding those questions. Please continue. Feel free to continue to add questions if you still have thoughts you'd like to share. We're going to reflect on these questions as we move through the presentation. And but for now, we're going to I'm going to hand it off to Chris, and she will share her screen and talk about being proactive.
All right. Hi, everyone. And I am Chris Gear. I'm MyStar's professional learning coordinator now, but up until December of last year, I was a middle school science teacher in Grosse Pointe, 25 years in the middle school classroom. All of this sounds very familiar to me. And one of the reasons we wanted to share this learning session with you, hold on, excuse me, I gotta share this again with sound. Mess that up. Okay, share sound. There we go, because I'm going to show you a little video in a few seconds. Okay, so anyway, about 10 years ago, I was in a leadership kind of classroom / leadership position in the district, and I was invited to attend a 2-year leadership program in Oakland schools called Galileo. And our Galileo cohort spent a lot of time talking about the 7 habits of highly effective people, and it all seemed a little cheesy to me at the time. But then over the last 10 years, as I found myself kind of changing some of the things I do, I was like, hey, you know what? Some of that's actually working. And so you may, if you have an advisory program or some kind of SEL program, you may have used the Leader in Me or some form of 7 habits for kids. Some of those habits are darn useful. And, excuse me. And the first habit is be proactive. And so when I started teaching MyStar, I realized that there were these kind of common concerns and complaints and issues and stresses and anxieties that parents had, caregivers, admin to some extent, most often parents and caregivers. And so I thought, how can I kind of get in front of this so that this doesn't become, I'm not saying the same thing over and over again at November conferences. And I thought, we'll be proactive. So we're going to go through some ideas and talk some things out, and I'll show you some resources and ways that you can kind of front load MyStar for your stakeholders, and you can kind of smooth out some of those or a lot of those complaints. So when you're going to be proactive, you want to not wait for things to happen to you. You want to make them happen the way you want them to happen up front. One of the things you have to think about is beginning with the end in mind. Where do you want to be when you're done with this process? And so I'm going to ask you now to do a similar task to what Lindsay just asked you, except instead of what you do here, let's talk about what would you like to hear? What would you like to hear at conferences or in the middle of the year, emails from parents or at IEPs or whenever you have interaction with parents and stakeholders, you know, when report cards come out. So again, we have slides and there's 4 of them, so there's plenty of room for everybody. But if you would just grab at least one sticky note and write down, what would you like to hear? Like, what's your favorite? Whoops, I don't know why it's doing that. What's your favorite thing to hear at conferences? What brings you joy? Where would you like to be? So take a minute, grab a sticky note, and throw something in there. What would you like to hear? So I know one of the things that brought me the most joy when I was sitting at conferences was for parents to tell me that their child had been talking about what we were doing in class. I just felt like I won if that happened, that I was a success. If they would say, yeah, we were in the car the other day and they mentioned blah, 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 or at dinner or whatever. So talking about class is great. My favorite class warms my heart. Maybe wasn't always their favorite, but is now. Having fun, learning a lot, love science. Parents love it when their kids love science because they really see science as that stepping stone to a STEM career. And you know, they often, you know, that's really what they want for their kids. Yes, my child has expressed an interest in STEM career. Better thinker, yeah. No longer defined by the grade. That would be amazing. I don't know if I ever heard that, but that's a great goal. Yeah, something happened to remind them of class, right? The fact that, you know, whenever they can connect and think about what you're doing outside of class, that's a success. I'm always hearing about your class. Yes, great. So that's where we want to end up, right? So we know what we hear, we know what we would like to hear. So let's think about how we can get those things to come together. So one of the other 7 habits, besides be proactive and begin with the end in mind, is to seek first to understand. So we're going to go for that win-win situation. We want to think about what does this group that we're working with, what do you think, based on your years of experience, what do they want for their kids? So let's just do this one in the chat this time. But as a parent or caregiver, what would you want for your middle school science students' experience? Or what have you heard parents and caregivers say they want for students? So let's think about, we know what teachers we want as teachers. What would we want as parents and caregivers? What do you think you'd hear or you'd like to hear? So just in the chat, drop some ideas in there. What do parents want for their kids? Hands-on, yes, parents, quite often that hands-on is a big thing that parents want. Successful in science classes through college. Yeah, they want their kids prepped for high school and college. All right, safe and yep, and edutaining. Happy and comfortable, but also prepared, hands-on, successful, challenged. Yep, a lot of parents want their kids to be challenged. They're worried that they're not going to be challenged. Happy, yeah. Engaged, ready for success. All right. My son is learning science at a high level, right? That challenge and that engagement. You know, we do have a lot of parents who have high expectations for their kids, and they're a little concerned that because we're not tracking kids, that it's going to be watered down. Yeah, you want teachers to know your kids on a personal level. I didn't start teaching until my kids were in elementary school, so I had that parent kind of perspective already. And for many years at back to school night, I talked about, you know, I have 2 kids, they're both grown, they're both have engineering degrees, but they were very different students. One, you know, always had everything in on time and was a really great A+ student, always looking for the next challenge. And the other one, you know, had missing assignments all the time in middle school and couldn't remember to do homework and all those things. So then I would assure them that, you know, we're going to meet the needs of, I'm going to meet the needs of your kids, no matter what kind of kid you're sending me. That, you know, we're going to welcome them all and make sure they all get what they need. All right. So now we kind of know what parents want. So now it's time to think win-win. So we've anticipated the common concerns and issues. That's being proactive. We've thought about what parents and caregivers want, seek first to understand. We've thought about what you as a teacher want. So we began with the end in mind. And so the big question is now, how can the MyStar NGSS-aligned curriculum meet everyone's needs? So we're going to think win-win here. And so I threw in a couple of clips from the MyStar website that are teacher quotes about how MyStar is meeting kids' needs. And we want to make this apparent to parents before they get to that anxiety level. So in this session, we're going to talk about how MyStar can meet the needs of parents and caregivers and their students. And you guys are going to do some of that work. As MyStar teachers, you have experiences and probably can think of things that Barb and I haven't. I'm going to show you some resources that MyStar has that'll help you get started with building some sort of communication product or piece with your stakeholders. And then we're going to give you a little time to actually talk to each other in small groups and kind of get a draft or a plan started about how you might use these things in the next couple of weeks. All right. So to give you an idea of what some things are that you might use in your classroom. Let me see, did I share now? I shared a couple of times. I'm sorry. Let me check and make sure that I shared with sound because I am going, yep, I did. Sorry. I'm going to show you a little video. So these are some things that if you have a back to school night or a PTO presentation or something you might consider using. And these come from NGSS. So the first one is a short YouTube video. And then the other 2 are a couple of handouts. So let's just take a look at this video. It's really not very long.
The world is moving so fast.
I know.
I hope that these kids are prepared for what's ahead of them.
We're learning from science standards written in 1996? I wasn't even born in 1996.
It's crazy to me to think that, you know, all across the country, our kids are being taught from science standards that are 20 years old.
So my son being a freshman here, how can you assure me that the level of education he's going to receive will prepare him to succeed in not only colleges, but in careers after he gets out of school?
In the coming years, jobs in science, technology, engineering, and math are expected to increase twice as much as jobs in other fields. We can't predict the future, but we can better prepare our children for it.
Basically, the way science is being taught now, it's a lot more applicable into the real world, and we're able to take the skills that we're learning and bring them further than just high school or middle school.
So I was asking Taylor about, you know, things she was doing in school, and she was so excited because she said, you know, we're learning how to be engineers, Mom.
Now we're doing the next generation science standards, or the NGSS. And basically what happens is it takes what we were learning like from books before. It wasn't doing as much like hands-on. And now they're becoming their own scientists. They're becoming engineers. They get so excited about saying, okay, today we're going to be an engineer. And they know the engineering process. They know what they're going to do first and how to solve the problems.
So also there's the problem solving, the brainstorming, the cause and effect, and the justification. I know that those skills will last throughout my whole life in any career field.
If you push a seesaw, it'll go back and forth.
Next Generation Science Standards will give our children the tools they need.
These new science standards, it's really preparing them to be those critical thinkers and more prepared in the job force. I mean, that's the goal. That's what we all want for our kids.
Find out more about the Next Generation Science Standards.
Did you have the internet when you were little?
All right, so that's an example of a good NGSS generated source that might help you start a conversation with parents or stakeholders about why we need to make this switch. And especially if your district is just kind of moving into an NGSS-aligned curriculum in the last year or two. And so this might seem really different to parents, or maybe your elementary school hasn't really adopted an NGSS program, but your middle school has been using MyStar for a few years, and your 6th grade or maybe even 7th grade parents need to kind of think about why we're doing things differently. 2 other good kind of handout resources that NGSS has is one of them is this, what does it look like in the classroom? It's a PDF file. I used to print this out and use this as a handout at back to school night. And it's just a very quick, here's what science used to look like, what you're thinking science should be, but here's what our goal is and our vision is. And when parents see this, they're like, hey, this is challenging. This is hands-on. This is all of those things that I want for my child. I want them to be happy. I want them to be engaged. I want them to be critical thinkers. So that's one. NGSS also has one that it's a 4-page handout. You don't have to use all 4 pages, but it's specifically targeted at middle school. And so there's, again, kind of a well-rounded argument and explanation of the vision of NGSS. And again, the 3rd page you may consider using. Again, it's going to look less like this. It's going to look more like this. And so it gives parents just kind of a real quick visual of what you're thinking you're expecting is not what you're going to get, but here's why. It's we're not just making this up. So those are 3 good resources that you might consider using. And then after you've maybe done a little bit of kind of broad brush, here's what NGSS has in mind, you can kind of bring it a little more local and think about how there are pieces of the MyStar curriculum that are specifically going to meet those student needs and give parents and students those experiences and those skills and that kind of attitude and love of science that they're looking for. And so I'm going to ask you to, Lindsay's going to put you in breakout rooms, and you're going to look at this Jamboard. And I made one Jamboard for each kind of big chunk of MyStar structure. So we have unit challenges in MyStar. How does a unit challenge and working towards a solution over the course of a unit towards a real life scenario, how is that good for kids? How is that going to get parents those things that they want for their kids? And so I'm just going to ask you to, in your groups, maybe just put up 1 or 2 ideas as you discuss that. Thinking about the disciplinary content, how can we know that kids are challenged by this content? How do we know it's high quality? How do we know it's aligned? What's available in MyStar that you can show to parents, or you can reassure them that this is legitimate, good, real science and engineering. Thinking about the practices, and I put a little cheat sheet there for you. How does MyStar engage kids in using the practices? What are we doing day to day in class that's gonna help kids not just learn to memorize the content, but to actually be able to do these science and engineering practices? And then the engineering is a huge piece in MyStar. And even if kids never become engineers, learning that kind of engineering thought process is useful to all of us. And so I'm just going to ask you to, in your breakout rooms, just take a few minutes, look at each of these 4, see if you as a group can post 1 or 2 thoughts of things that you could say to parents regarding these 4 kind of big pieces of MyStar structure. All right, welcome back. I hope you had a chance to look at what some of the other groups posted while you were discussing and posting. There's some really great stuff here. Some thoughts that are going to be good resources for you as you try to prepare whatever kind of communication or product you're going to want to use this year. So working towards a real life scenario, there are great thoughts here about they're not simple. It's real world, it prepares them for the future, helps them to learn how to problem solving, things like that. Applicable outside of school, which, you know, we can get at that. Hey, we're talking about it at the dinner table kind of thing. The science disciplinary content, yep, it is all laid out and double checked and triple checked by the MyStar staff. We do have that STEMworks badge. We do have the one unit that we've submitted to Achieve, got NGSS stamp of approval. It's checked by multiple people in multiple roles, teachers and coaches and grad students and professors. Wrote the curriculum. Yeah, I used to, because I worked on some of those writing hubs, I used to tell my parents, you know, when we're writing a unit on volcanoes, you know, there's somebody with a doctorate in volcanology sitting in the room. And when we're talking about engineering, there are engineering professors in the room. And, you know, MyStar draws on all that expertise from Michigan Tech and then combines it with middle school teachers, you know, real life experience with what works for kids. And so it's a really powerful curriculum. So science and engineering practices are just embedded. Kids are going to do all of these things. And these are all things that parents want for their kids. They want them to be able to use models and plan out investigations and analyze and interpret data and use math and engage in argument from evidence. Gosh, if we could just do that, we could solve 99% of our political problems right now. And so these are all important things that parents want for their kids. And then designing and evaluating engineering solutions. And I know, you know, we kind of rushed you out of there for that one, but kids are going to learn how to think about criterion constraints and use decision matrices. And they're going to be creative in designing solutions. They're going to be logical in evaluating those solutions. And even if they never become engineers, just that kind of logical thought process and way to approach problems will serve them well throughout their lives. So thank you for that. There's lots of really good stuff here. And these are things that you can go back to as you're creating your own communication piece later. So one of the other things that I would do after I would talk to my parents real briefly about what is NGSS and why is MyStar a good curriculum and what are you going to get from a MyStar curriculum is then I try to get my parents excited by giving them some concrete examples. So I would list, you know, here are the units that we're going to do this year. Here's a little bit about the scenario and why that would be engaging to your kids. So, you know, I talk about the unit 6.1 and how it's about flooding. And have we had flooding in Grosse Pointe this summer? Absolutely. You know, the freeways are closed and people's basements are flooding. And what's causing that? And how can we resolve that? That's a real life issue. And then we talk about 6.2 is all about viruses and epidemiology, and that's awfully real life, and so on. And so, you know, look at those things that you're going to teach and then, you know, get your parents just a little bit excited about, you know, here's what those unit challenges actually look like. Here are some examples. And here's how, here's what your kids are going to study and here's what they're going to learn, along with all of those skills and how to work together and use engineering thought processes and things like that. And the last thing that I'm going to ask you to think about before I turn this over to Barb is ways to turn concerns into positives. And so I have some slides here and they're numbered. And so we're going to put you back in your breakout rooms and you're going to find the slide with your breakout room number. And I would like you to think about what's different about MyStar. This is not the only thing, but these are some big things that people come up with and why it's good. there are a lot of parents who, when you say I'm not going to give a lot of homework, they're actually relieved. They may not want to show it in front of the other parents because they want to think that, hey, my kid's working hard, my kid's, going to go to a great university, those kinds of things. But the day-to-day, when you say science isn't going to be your problem, sometimes they're happy with that stuff. So if you could just, in your breakout rooms, just maybe bullet or add a couple of sentences for each one of these three things. Why is it maybe good that we have less homework? Why is less traditional studying maybe going to be good for kids? And why is having no textbook? How could that be a positive? All right, so questions about that? So Lindsay's going to put you back in your groups, in your same groups. Find the slide with the number that matches your group number, your room number. And we'll give you a few minutes to see if you can pop some good ideas into your slides on these. What's different and why it's good. All right, so welcome back. In the interest of time, and you all can read, so I'm not going to read every single thing in here, but I am blown away by the amazing thoughts that are captured here on these slides. And these slides are available for you as resources. So use them to think about what you might want to put in your sales pitch. So great things about why homework isn't all it's cracked up to be, why less traditional studying actually is a good thing. And then textbooks, they are geared toward regurgitation. They are expensive. They do kind of penalize kids who aren't great readers. Less homework has just been win-win-win as far as in my experience as a classroom teacher, and really secretly a lot of parents are happy with that. So can't lose those textbooks. Less stress on families for the homework. Less traditional studying means those non-traditional kids just from participating in class are going to be okay. And it allows various ways to reach solutions, right? So there's not just one right way all the way through all the things that we're doing and learning. Excellent. All right. So I'm going to just leave you with this last piece. This is a slide that is in there. We have a set of slides that you can use as a resource in the teacher library. We'll show you where that is. But so often, and you may hear this more from teachers and administrators than from parents, but especially because we don't have a textbook, the pressure is always, but there's no literacy. Where's the literacy piece? And I will make the argument that literacy is more than decoding paragraphs. So when people say literacy, they think you have to be reading a textbook. And, certainly there's value in learning how to read and decode paragraphs. But if you look at the English language arts standards, the Common Core standards, and I just pulled 8th grade here because that's where all our kids are going to be eventually. MyStar nails the listening, speaking, and writing standards. So English language arts is reading, but also listening, speaking, writing. We're nailing that stuff, especially in the informational text pieces. And then reading is decoding words, but there's also a big chunk in the standards about reading context clues kinds of things. Texts include graphs and charts and tables and diagrams and models, and we're doing that all day long. And so I would really argue that MyStar is hitting some of the ELA standards probably a lot better and a lot harder than your English teachers. So even though there isn't a textbook, don't let people tell you that MyStar doesn't have rich literacy embedded in it. So, and this slide again is available as a resource. We'll show you in a few minutes. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Barb, who's our assessment expert, and she's going to focus specifically on some of the concerns that our stakeholders have with the assessments and the tests, because they're kind of unique, and Barb has good information for you.
All right, and I might even add with this literacy writ, when we were preparing our unit for WestEd evaluation, one of the things that I was tasked with doing was finding how we were teaching math and ELA standards. And there's a lot of research also. Students are learning a lot about authentic research, bias, those sorts of things when they're using MyStar units. So another ELA that kept coming up again and again and again. It seems like every lesson is a research lesson. You start with a question and you make sense of it and you come up with your authentic sources and other sources. So in any case, first thing I would say is please be proactive about assessment. It's going to be a place where, and I even looking at your questions earlier on the concerns you get from parents, a lot of it's going to have to do with assessment and grading. Parents tend to be and caregivers very vested in grades. And I would encourage you to help them to see the big picture benefits of using MyStar style assessment versus the small thinking of, I'm just going to focus on my student's grade right now, that the goal is to get an A. No, not necessarily. The goal is really be in a place where you're going to be successful moving forward. And the perfect time is middle school to have opportunity to practice without being really penalized. So helping your parents to buy into the idea that what you really care about is their children's long-term success will get you a long ways, I think, in helping students or helping parents to see that a different kind of assessment is really in their students' best interest. And that's what we all want. We all wanted teachers for our kids that cared about our kids, knew our kids, and wanted the best for our kids. And that's where we want to get parents here. So
in your district, have you eliminated the grades in science?
No, we've not eliminated grades. We've done some different things with grading in our district, and obviously we don't have the teachers that were there didn't have the power necessarily to do that. But we have gone to a standards-based grade and a work habits grade. And we have really taught to parents a lot, especially in science, about why this new type of assessment is a real benefit to their kids long-term, and why maybe grades are not the gold standard of achievement necessarily. And so I often found that if I could get parents on board with me, understanding that learning is so much more important than the grade you take home. I always said I'd rather see my kids get a B and learn a bunch to get an A and have it be easy and them not be challenged. So, really talking to parents about that. MyStar assessments are going to look different. They're going to look different to parents and students, and they're going to look different than the kind of assessments they're probably taking in their other classes. And parents want to know why. And so, explaining to them, and we're going to look through how they're different and also why that's important. If we are looking at assessing authentic understanding, we can better remediate. A multiple choice question doesn't always illuminate student thinking for us. And so MyStar assessments really try to help teachers understand what students know, understand, and can do. And if we have more insight, we can do a better job of supporting students as they learn and grow. And so helping parents to understand that assessments are going to look less like what they were used to, this memorize, regurgitate, forget. They're going to look more like connecting what they've learned and experienced in a new way. And you could even ask parents, like, what would make your children more successful in the future? If they can represent exactly what they've learned and experienced, or if they can connect what they've learned and experienced to a new context. What do you need to do in your careers? Pretty much everybody, nobody's just regurgitating what you know. What would be better for your student? Explain a phenomenon or address a problem that you fully understand, or to connect that understanding to a new phenomenon or a new problem? What would best prepare your students? Just being able to provide that factually correct answer, or making thinking visible and making sense of things by using reasoning, modeling, explanations, arguments, investigation plans, questions, predictions? If it's me, I want my kid doing what's in that right-hand column with the tech, because I know they're going to be better prepared for life if they can do those things. So if we think about how MyStar assessments are different, we're asking students, and this is the number one thing I would get, you didn't even teach them that. How can you expect them to answer that question when you didn't even teach them that? Oh, but I did. I asked them to take what they'd learned and I asked them to apply it in a new way, and then I can evaluate their authentic understanding, and then I can remediate where they need it. So we ask students to take what they've learned and apply it in a new way. And if you think about what you do all day long in your careers, I mean, that's what you're doing. You're applying what you know, unfamiliar phenomenon and problems, and that's what employers want. people who can do that. Our assessments are NGSS aligned, and they go through achieve non-negotiables. We're going to just look at those quickly in a minute. We try to limit knowledge recall types of items. They're usually only used as scaffolding to kind of be an entry point for students to help them make sense of a problem or a phenomenon. And we try to scaffold, and you can even show an item cluster to your parents, have them work through it, have them think about what they had to think about to do that. Have them work through that scaffolded sense making. At the end, I've got to solve this problem. I've got to make sense. So good for kids. Then making that student thinking visible to expose misconceptions so we can address them. Here's a big one. These MyStar assessments are designed to be similar to state and national tests, not just the MSTEP, but you can take your parents to the ACT practice tests, and you're going to see exactly the kinds of things that kids are doing on MyStar assessments. What better time to get them practice? And if you tell your parents, listen, what I'm trying to do here is get them ready to set them up for success, not just in middle school, but in high school, in their academic careers, in their life, in their work career. Here's how we're doing it. And this really helps us. So if we're asking students to make sense of the world, we've got to have them to make sense of phenomenon and problems, and that's exactly what those state and national tests are going to be asking students to do. We try to make our assessments three-dimensional, and we really want students to be developing those transferable skills, problem solving, analysis, communication. We're getting away from memorize, regurgitate, and forget, and so are state and national tests. So what's a non-negotiable? And many of you, I can tell by the answers that you've been giving, are very familiar with this, so I won't spend a lot of time. But these are the things that really are the important features of high-quality science tests. This is what we're moving towards all over. So we want students to make sense of a phenomenon or solve a problem. We want them to engage in sense making. We want them using all three dimensions. We want our assessment to make sense to students, and we want you to be able to use the information you get for the purpose that you have. So, picture. What are the benefits for kids of using NGSS-aligned curriculum and assessment? Transferable skills. We want students adept at problem solving, sense making, transfer of knowledge, communication, adaptability, ICP, and CCC use. Why? Because they'll be ready for their careers. Fastest growing occupations require science, math, and all the above skills. But any career, a student is going to have an advantage if they have those transferable skills. And we're asking them to practice those and demonstrate those with MyStar curriculum and assessment. And I noticed one of the questions was, why do we always have to work in groups? Because you know what? Collaboration is a transferable skill that students are going to need in both academic and work life. And now is the time to start practicing those skills. Let's develop them now before the grades are going on transcripts that are going to universities. Scientific literacy. Doesn't matter whether you're going to have a STEM career or not, you're going to need to make life decisions, financial decisions, medical decisions that require you to ask questions, to analyze and interpret data, have those literacy skills, those transferable skills like sense making, problem solving. You know, you've got to make some decisions about what you're going to do with your money. You've got to be able to analyze and interpret data. College readiness. One of the members of the assessment team is a college professor actively right now, and he will say that the number one thing he hears from other professors is that students need to be ready to apply and manage their own learning. They are not being spoon-fed in college. And so if we want to get students ready for success in the college classroom, those are the kinds of skills they're going to need. They need to be able to apply what they've learned. They need to be able to manage their own learning. And then lastly, and this is the big one, I thought, this is where I got a lot of positives from parents, is they really want their kids to be ready for these state and national tests. They know that kids have a better chance at earning scholarships, those sorts of things. if they're confident when it comes to these kinds of assessments. And using MyStar assessment helps to build that confidence, build that skill. It makes them familiar with the kinds of things they're going to see. Your straight A students that just want to study guides so they can memorize and regurgitate, it's not going to serve them well in the future. Your lower achieving students really have an opportunity now to apply what they've learned as they've been engaged through the curriculum. They're going to get practice with how I do that on an assessment to really show what I know. And so we're really helping students to move towards that pathway to success. And I think probably that's what most caregivers want for their kids. So that leads us to the big question that I know you all get. Where's the study guide? How can I get them ready? The answer is there really isn't one. We can give them unit summary tables. We can give them big guidelines. So be able to explain how energy is transferred, be able to explain how populations change in response to resource availability. And I would encourage you to give students those sorts of things to help them prepare. And, you know, can you make a model? Can you read a graph? Those sorts of things. Give them that checklist. This is what you'll need to be able to do. But what parents and caregivers can do when they ask you is they can make sure their kids are in class. It's active learning and problem solving. There is no substitute. The makeup work for a vacation, there isn't, I can't give you good makeup work because I can't replicate what we did in class for your one student. Being there is the best thing you can do. And as a parent, you have to make a decision. Where's your priority at this point? Ask your students to explain what they're doing and learning. Make it a conversation and then make connections. Where are they seeing those things in their own lives? Help them to reflect on their science experiences and communicate their learning. How has their thinking changed about it? What are they doing well? What are they still working on mastering? How are they doing with graphing? How are they doing with modeling? How are they doing with CERs? And some parents would get on me and be like, oh my gosh, this argument from evidence. My kid wants a guinea pig and they made a PowerPoint with all this evidence of why they should, you know, why do you have to teach them how to argue so well? And then the last one I think really is important, and that's emphasize learning over grades. Make sure your parents realize that, you know, grades are just one little piece. Learning is what really matters in the big picture. It's not just, did you get an A? That's such a small thing when you look at the big picture of what you're going to need to do in life and in school. So encourage that growth mindset, perseverance, remind them that these middle school grades don't follow them forever. And as they get better at this assessment, you're going to see them improve, and they're going to see themselves improve, and that's a great feeling too. So off my soapbox and on to the next part. I'm going to turn this over to Lindsay.
Thanks so much, Barb, for all that great information about how to get caregivers and parents on board with assessment. And thank you, Chris, for all that great information about, you know, how MyStar is achieving, you know, building critical thinkers and, you know, really enhancing that science thinking for students. So there's lots of ways that you can communicate the information that we've talked about here today. You know, there's letters that you can send home. There's communications you can have with your administrator during conferences and, you know, PTO presentations. There's back to school nights, and you can post things on your website. You can send out emails to your parents. So, whoa, that's a lot of places to communicate this information. So we've built a teacher library to help maybe consolidate and, you know, organize some of this information so you can look for this later and pull these resources when you need them for these different ways to communicate. And so we have a link here in the slides to this teacher library. It's also available on your MyStar dashboard under the additional teacher resources column. So you got to scroll down a little bit, but the link is also here in the slides, like I said, and in the agenda. And sorry about that. I'll just show you really quick. It's here. You know, there's lots of teaching and NGSS resources, but really what we thought would be most helpful for today and our topic for today is a nice list of organizational resources to support you in communicating the benefits of MyStar. So here in this organizational resources table, you'll find things like parent letter templates, administrator information, a nice MyStar brochure that you can put out during, back to school night, and many other resources you can use to communicate this information with your stakeholders. So we're going to take a little bit of time in breakout rooms so that you can look at these resources and talk with your colleagues and find ones that will work for your situation and includes the information that you want to share and make it your own. So I'm going to go back to presenting here. So I'm going to build out breakout rooms again, and I'd like you to look through those teacher library resources, in particular those organizational resources to be proactive and get your stakeholders on board. And start to make a plan to talk to your community partners. What do you need? Who is your audience? Who are you trying to convey this message to? And how will you communicate the differences and the benefits of MyStar to your stakeholders? And then thinking about what additional resources you might need to deliver this message for your audience. Sorry about that. We'll open up the breakout rooms again. And we are running short on time, but I did want to give an opportunity to talk to your colleagues about the resources that are here. So I'm going to open it up and dig into what's there, and we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Well, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with hopefully a few different people in this last breakout room here. We wanted to just give a few minutes here. Does anybody want to share any helpful information or really nuggets of insight that you discussed in your breakout rooms? Could either put it in the chat or unmute yourself and share. Maybe a resource you didn't know was available that you're really excited to use, or any questions that you talked about earlier. Okay.
I'm rewatching my curriculum night video from last year when I'm done with this, just to see. I know that I hit on it, so I'll share if I feel like it could be useful. But I got to rewatch it first because I don't remember.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. If it's share worthy, that would be awesome.
I'm sure it's share worthy. It's if you're comfortable sharing it. That's how I feel sometimes too. But thanks, Megan. That's great. We really liked the new vision document. That was the before science and now the current science. That seems like a great resource to use to get stakeholders on board.
One of the things I've done with that too is asked, would you prefer that your student be able to do this and the new, or this and the old, and mix them up? And you're going to find parents are going to say, no, I want my child to be able to do this at the end of middle school, not so much that. It's another way you could use those for a parent night.
That's a great suggestion. Thanks, Barb.
Someone had asked about posters, and we do have a couple of MyStar unit and lesson structure posters, and I put those in the teacher resource library also. I'm not sure if the person who asked is actually here, but they're there.
Yeah, great. Patty, I think that was you. So sorry not to call you out during our presentation, but those are there for you here. So maybe those would be of interest to you. Are there any questions before we finish up today about, how to communicate this to your stakeholders? Do you need more support? What do we need to answer still?
Well, if I may, there appears to be a disconnect with expectations and requirements for the middle school, because we have the MyStar versus the elementary school where they have the standard textbook. And then in addition to that, their focus tends to be, math and ELA as they're preparing for MSTEP and what have you. So how do we, first off, is MyStar working on units for the elementary level? And how do we hope the parents buy in to the new change in that curriculum, because it is so far removed from what the children are accustomed to, even if they do get science at the elementary level? with some kind of efficacy.
Well, I can say that as far as I know, and Chris would probably be might be a better one to answer this, there are no plans to create an elementary curriculum at this time. And my thoughts would be, sharing some of this. So obviously, when we're talking about elementary school, there is such a focus on ELA and math, and we really, that's for a good reason, right? But I think even that little video that Chris showed and some of the resources here, and the idea that, we've built some of these ELA and math skills, and now it's time to start, moving students towards the kinds of things they may do in the future. I mean, we're a liaison between elementary and high school, and in high school they're really going to start to be more content area focused, and we're working toward getting them there. And I think, again, it always goes back for me to showing parents how this is going to benefit their kids, how it's best for their kids. And that it may be a shift, but they're going to have a lot of shifts in life. There's going to be a lot of times when things are going to be different. And so this is a great opportunity, to focus more on some of those content areas.
Thanks, Barb. I agree.
Thank you everyone for your time today. We are at time, but we can stay on and answer any more questions or continue this conversation. I threw a link to the survey in the chat if you would be so kind as to give us feedback on our session today. And there are a couple slides, just a reminder of teaching resources for you for the year, remote learning lessons focused on SEPs, slide guides and student journals, off-the-shelf lessons. Those are all on your MyStar dashboard, and scope and sequence documents to figure out what units you can teach in a year and which ones to pick. Those are available in this teacher library as well, and in the agenda. They're linked in the agenda. We have more MyStar Learning Series sessions this fall, so please sign up and keep an eye out for future topics, and share topics with us if you have an idea that you would like to see during the session. So again, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate you being here. Good luck with the start of the school year. We're so excited for you to be back in the classroom, and we really appreciate you being here today.